everyone, this is Robin the Delta Crafter and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you an ink blending trick to help you create highlights on an ink blended background. I'm showing you a card here where I use this trick to make this Halloween card, and I think it turned out great. I'm going to first start off by sharing with you some of the products that I use to make this card. There's lots of supplies that I use to make this card, and we're going to start off with this stencil. This is the Woodland Forest stencil from Hero Arts, and I use this one to create the tree scene on the ink blended background. I also use Distress Inks and Rustic Wilderness, Prize Ribbon, which is the newest addition to the lineup, and Chipped Sapphire. For the black, I use the Intense Black from Hero Arts, and then I also use Caramel on the pumpkins. To lay down the ink, I use my ink blending brushes, and then to keep my stencil in place, because you can see it has some very intricate pieces and parts, I used Pixie Spray. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and ink blend the background, and here's the trick. Start with colored cardstock. Though this cardstock does not look like it's light blue, it actually is. Here I am bringing in a piece of white cardstock to show you the difference. And you can clearly tell right there that this cardstock is actually light blue. So what using colored cardstock does is provide a glow or a highlight between the two colors that you are laying down for ink blending. Part of the idea is to also leave just the tiniest little bit of gap where your colors do not overlap so intensely. So here I'm going to show you in just a few minutes what I mean. So I'm getting ready to lay down the first color, Rustic Wilderness. I'm also sharing with you a new tool that I got in. This is not a sponsored video, but I did want to share it with you guys because I like to share things with you that I find and use and that I like. These are ink stands from the Ink Stand Shop. And what they do is they hold the inks in place while you ink blend, so that frees up your other hand from having to hold the ink pad. Now, out of habit, I went ahead and was putting my hand on the ink stand, but you'll see in just a moment here that I'm no longer need to do that because the ink stand does the work for me. They come in several different shapes, and this one works in particularly well with the Tim Holtz Distress Inks. So I've laid down my Rustic Wilderness, and now I'm moving in with the Prize Ribbon. And you can see there, and there'll be a better picture in a little bit, where I'm leaving just a slight gap between the green and the blue where it's not overlapping completely. That little halo and highlight is going to come into play as we continue to build this base. So I've added the third and final ink color, the Chipped Sapphire, to complete the background. Because I started with a piece of colored cardstock, I don't have to lay down as much ink as I would if I had used a white base. So I'm just adding just the last few touches of ink, and now let's take a look at this background. You can see down there the beginnings of what I'm going to use as fog in my final background. So I'm going to use that little gap to my advantage. We're going to continue with the background by now creating the trees. So I'm going to use that Intense Black ink from Hero Arts and the Woodland Forest stencil. And I'm going to apologize because some of the ink blending is cut off because I had the stencil a little bit too low in the frame, but you will get to see it. Off camera, I applied some Pixie Spray to the back of my stencil to make sure that it sticks down. When I've used this stencil before, what I've noticed is some of the branches and leaves and grassy area will wiggle and move because they're so tight and fine. They will move if I don't use Pixie Spray. So this is definitely one of those stencils that Pixie Spray, you want to use that because it is a great benefit. So now I'm just coming in with my black ink blending brush, and I'm going to lay down some ink to get these trees. For the final look for this card, I want it to look like the trees are in the background far off and there's some sort of light source way off in the far distance. So that made me want to do the trees in black, and then that works with the size of the pumpkin die cut that I'm going to be adding to this later on. So here I am just continuing to add the black ink. And even though I've used Pixie Spray, I'm still deciding to hold down the stencil when I get to the parts that I feel like might move and therefore mess up my background. So now I've laid down pretty much all the black ink that I want to put down. And now it's time to reveal the background. And this is when the magic really starts to come together for what this card is going to look like. So now I'm going to hold it up to the camera. And now can you see that fog right there at where the ground and the sky meet? Doesn't that look cool? Starting with the colored cardstock has really helped make this effect come to life, and I'm really, really liking it. So let's keep going. So now that we've got our background done, it's time to move on to the pumpkin. Off camera, I have die cut the pumpkin, and this pumpkin is the Jack-o'-lantern die set from Hero Arts. So in order to kind of give some dimension to this pumpkin, I'm going to add some caramel ink, which is also from Hero Arts, to the edges of the pumpkin just to give it a little depth and dimension. So you can see here that I've brought in another ink stand. This is the ink stand that's made for the mini ink cubes. And it pretty much works with all the mini ink cubes that are out on the market because they're pretty much the same size. So this stand will allow you to have 4 different ink cubes laid out all at one time. So here I'm adding the caramel ink to the edges of my pumpkin. I'm going to add it to the pumpkin base as well as the top of the pumpkin. To make sure that the stem stands out, I'm going to come in with a Spectrum Noir alcohol ink marker in EB5 and just color in the stem of the pumpkin topper. You can use whatever medium you want to use to color in your stem, whether it's a different type of alcohol marker, a colored pencil, polychromos, whatever your heart desires. Off camera, I went ahead and took the base that I inked up and cut out the jack-o'-lantern face. This, which is also included in the die set. One of the things that I like about it, though, is that it's separate. So you don't have to cut every pumpkin out with the jack-o'-lantern face. So I really, really like that about this particular die set. So I'm adding some liquid glue to my inked up pumpkin, and I'm going to lay that on top of a yellow pumpkin. So you can see there the solid pumpkin without the jack-o'-lantern face cut out. And I'm doing this because obviously I want the eyes and the mouth and nose to look like they're glowing. So I'm going to back it, the jack-o'-lantern face with that yellow. And then I'm going to continue to layer up the pumpkin and the topper with a couple of pieces of cardstock to get some dimension. So now I'm going to adhere my inked up card panel to my card base. And then we're going to move on to adding the pumpkin to the card. Before I do that, I felt like the yellow glow was just a little bit too stark. So I'm just going to come in with that caramel ink and just tone it down a little bit by running my ink blending brush over the jack-o'-lantern's face. So I'm going to use some liquid glue to adhere this pumpkin down, and it's good to use a strong adhesive because this pumpkin is 3 layers thick. So I'm going to use liquid glue on the main portion of the pumpkin. And then for the topper, I'm going to use some foam adhesive because I want it to pop up a little bit above the pumpkin. Even though the topper is also 3 layers thick, I want it to sit sort of on top of the jack-o'-lantern face, the jack-o'-lantern body, and so I need some foam adhesive in order to achieve that goal. So I'm just lay down the jack-o'-lantern top, move it down just a tiny bit, and then everything is in place. I grabbed one of the sentiments in the Autumn Messages stamp set, also from Hero Arts, that I felt would work well with this card. And it says, "Hey Ghoul Friend," which I thought was so super cute. So I've inked that up with the Intense Black ink and laid that down on a piece of yellow cardstock. That's the same yellow cardstock that I used for the background for the eyes of the jack-o'-lantern face. So I want to make a little flag end, so I'm just coming in with my Cutter Bee precision scissors and just hand cutting a little flag end. I'm going to put some foam adhesive tape on the back of this sentiment so it can also have some dimension and pop up from the background as well. This is the foam tape that I get from Dollar Tree. I've talked to you guys about that before in the previous videos, and I like it a lot. So I'm going to lay this sentiment down on the background on the card, and I didn't quite get it as straight as I would like it. Thank God I didn't press it down like I'm doing right here. So I was able to move it, and we're going to call this card complete. Now that the card is all put together, you can really see how using that colored cardstock made that highlight or glow on this background. And I really think it adds a lot to the mood and the feeling of this card. That's all for today, everyone. I want to thank you for stopping by my channel and joining me on this video today. Be sure to check me out on Instagram and Facebook at The Delta Crafter, and you can also drop by my blog, thedeltacrafter.com. Thank you again, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye, everybody.